She knew she shouldn't be running late again, but life with a 4-year-old rarely followed any schedule. Elowen Grace Blake rushed through the gleaming lobby of Hale Technologies, her honey blonde hair catching the Austin morning sunlight, streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 29, she moved with the practiced grace of a woman who had learned to juggle motherhood and career with military precision. Her tailored navy blazer hugged her curves perfectly, the silk blouse beneath flowing like liquid gold as she hurried toward the executive elevator. "Good morning, Mrs. Blake," called Marcus from security, tipping his cap with the familiar warmth she'd grown accustomed to over 3 years. "Morning, Marcus," she breathed, clutching her Starbucks vanilla latte, no sugar as always, while fumbling for her access card. The elevator doors slid open with a soft whisper, revealing her reflection in the polished steel. Green-gray eyes stared back at her, framed by the kind of natural beauty that turned heads without trying. But Elowen had stopped noticing the looks years ago. The 36th floor was already buzzing with corporate energy when she stepped out. Through the glass walls of the corner office, she could see him, Cassian James Hale, CEO and the most infuriatingly cold man she'd ever worked for. At 6'3", his presence dominated any room he entered. Even seated behind his mahogany desk, broad shoulders filling out a charcoal Tom Ford suit, he commanded attention without saying a word. His dark hair was styled to perfection, not a strand out of place despite the early hour. She knew he'd already completed his 5 a.m. CrossFit session. She'd overheard him scheduling around his workouts countless times. The morning stubble along his strong jawline was meticulously maintained, framing lips that rarely smiled in her presence. "You're 7 minutes late," came his deep voice as she entered his office, not bothering to look up from his laptop screen. Elowen set his usual black coffee on the desk, 2 shots of espresso, no cream, no sugar, and pulled out her tablet. "The school called. Noah had a situation with finger paints. I had to take him fresh clothes." For just a moment, those piercing blue-gray eyes flicked up to meet hers. Something flickered there, gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "The Morrison contract needs revisions by noon," he said curtly, returning to his screen. "And reschedule. My lunch with Henderson. Make it dinner instead." "Of course, Mr. Hale." She kept her voice professionally neutral, though after 3 years his constant dismissiveness still stung. Other employees spoke of glimpses of warmth, moments when their intimidating CEO showed flashes of humor or kindness. With her, there was only ice. As she turned to leave, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her stomach drop. Little Sprouts Daycare. "Mrs. Blake, I'm so sorry, but Jenny called in sick and our backup sitter just canceled. We don't have anyone to cover Noah's room today." Elowen closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of single motherhood pressing down on her shoulders. I can't leave work. The CEO has..." "I understand, honey, but we legally can't keep him without proper staffing ratios. Can someone pick him up?" Someone. As if she had a someone. As if she hadn't been facing every crisis alone for 4.5 years. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she whispered, hanging up. Behind her, Cassian's typing had stopped. She could feel his gaze burning into her back, but she didn't turn around. "Problem?" His voice held that edge of impatience she knew so well. "I have to pick up my son. Daycare emergency." She squared her shoulders, preparing for the lecture about professional responsibility and commitment that was surely coming. Instead, silence stretched between them like a taut wire. "Bring him here," he said quietly. Elowen spun around, certain she'd misheard. "I'm sorry?" Cassian was studying her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a heartbeat, his carefully constructed mask slipped, and she glimpsed something raw and unguarded in those blue-gray depths. "Bring your son to the office. We have the client presentation at 3. I need you here." He paused, running a hand through his dark hair in a gesture that seemed almost uncertain. "He can stay in the conference room. Just keep him quiet." Elowen stared at him, speechless. In 3 years, Cassian Hale had never shown the slightest flexibility about anything, let alone childcare emergencies. "Thank you." she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. As she hurried out to collect Noah, she missed the way Cassian watched her leave, his hand unconsciously moving to rest over his heart as if trying to contain something that threatened to break free. 45 minutes later, Elowen returned with a whirlwind of 4-year-old energy. Noah Alexander Blake burst through the office doors like a miniature tornado, his golden curls bouncing with each step, green eyes bright with curiosity and excitement. "Whoa, Mama! This place is huge," he announced, his tiny voice echoing off the glass walls. He wore his favorite superhero t-shirt, Captain America's shield proudly displayed across his chest, and light-up sneakers that flashed with every step. Several employees looked up from their desks, smiling at the adorable disruption. But Elowen only had eyes for one person's reaction. Cassian stood frozen in his office doorway, his imposing frame suddenly seeming almost vulnerable. As Noah spotted him and tilted his head back to take in the full height of the intimidating CEO, something extraordinary happened. Cassian's expression softened completely. "Are you the boss man, Mr.?" Noah asked with the fearless directness only children possessed. "Hale," Cassian replied, his deep voice gentler than Elowen had ever heard it. "But you can call me Mr. Cass. Mr. Cass." Noah clapped his hands together. "Do you have any snacks? Mama forgot to pack my goldfish crackers, and my tummy is making dinosaur sounds." And then, miracle of miracles, Cassian James Hale smiled. Not the polite, professional curve of lips Elowen had seen him use with clients, but a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face and made her heart skip a dangerous beat. But just as quickly as it appeared, the moment shattered. Cassian's phone rang, his assistant's voice cutting through the spell. "Mr. Hale, the board meeting has been moved up. They need you in conference room A immediately." The wall slammed, back into place. Cassian straightened, his jaw tightening as he reached for his suit jacket. "Keep him quiet," he said to Elowen, his voice once again all business. But as he walked past Noah toward the elevator, he paused, crouching down until he was eye level with the little boy. "See you later, buddy," he said softly, and ruffled Noah's golden curls with surprising tenderness. As the elevator doors closed, behind him, Elowen stood in the sudden silence, her heart pounding with a question she'd never dared ask herself in 3 years of working for Cassian Hale. Who was the real man behind that impenetrable mask? And why did he seem to save his rarest smiles for everyone but her? The morning sun had given way to afternoon shadows when Noah's stomach began its dinosaur symphony in earnest. Elowen looked up from her laptop in the conference room, where she'd been juggling client emails while Noah colored quietly at the far end of the mahogany table. His concentration had been impressive for a 4-year-old. 45 minutes of drawing dinosaurs, spaceships, and what appeared to be a very tall man with dark hair standing next to a much shorter woman with yellow hair. "Mama, I'm really hungry," Noah announced, abandoning his crayons to rub his small belly dramatically. "Like starving to death hungry." "I know, baby. Just a few more minutes and we can—" The conference room door opened, and Cassian stepped inside. He'd loosened his tie during the board meeting, the charcoal silk hanging casually around his neck. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd run his fingers through it in frustration, a gesture Elowen had noticed he made when deep in thought. "The Morrison meeting has been pushed to 4, he said, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Noah's artwork scattered across the polished table. Something in his expression shifted. "What's all this?" Noah perked up immediately, scrambling to gather his drawings. "I made pictures. Want to see, Mr. Cass?" Elowen started to intervene. Surely the CEO of a major tech company had better things to do than admire a preschooler's crayon masterpieces. But Cassian surprised her by walking over to the table, his tall frame folding as he leaned down to examine Noah's creations. "This one's a T-Rex fighting a spaceship," Noah explained with the serious air of a museum curator. "And this one is my mama at work, see? She types really fast on her computer." Cassian picked up the drawing. Stick figures rendered in bold primary colors. The tall figure with black scribbles for hair stood next to a shorter one with yellow streamers flowing around her head. Between them was a tiny figure with golden curls, all three holding hands under a rainbow. "Who's this?" Cassian asked, pointing to the tall figure. "That's you, Mr. Cass. You're like super tall, like a giant, but the nice kind from the stories." Noah beamed up at him. "Mama, can we show him the fort I made under the table?" Before Elowen could protest, Noah had dropped to his hands and knees, crawling under the conference table. She started to follow, but Cassian was already moving, his expensive suit forgotten as he crouched down to peer into Noah's makeshift hideout. "Whoa!" came Cassian's voice from beneath the table, genuinely impressed. "You've got support beams and everything." Noah had dragged the rolling chairs to create walls, using Elowen's blazer and his own tiny jacket as a roof. Her heart clenched watching this powerful man, worth millions, commanding respect from board, rooms to Wall Street, crawling around on his hands and knees to admire a 4-year-old's furniture fort. "It's our secret base," Noah whispered conspiratorially. "Mama, you gotta come in too, there's room for all of us." "Noah, Mr. Hale has important work." "Actually," Cassian's voice interrupted from under the table, "I think this fort deserves a proper inspection. We can't have any structural weaknesses in our secret base, can we, Agent Noah?" "Agent Noah!" the little boy squealed with delight. "What's your code name, Mr. Cass?" Elowen found herself sliding out of her chair and onto the carpeted floor, her pencil skirt making the maneuver less than graceful. As she crawled under the table to join them, she came face to face with Cassian in the dim, intimate space Noah had created. This close, she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her pulse quicken. His blue-gray eyes held a warmth she'd never seen before, and when he smiled at Noah's chatter about secret missions and dinosaur invasions, laugh lines crinkled at the corners of his eyes. "I'm Agent Castle," Cassian said after a moment's consideration, and something in his voice made Elowen's breath catch. "That's a good one. And Mama can be Agent Angel, 'cause she's the prettiest angel ever." Noah beamed at his mother, then frowned thoughtfully. "But Mr. Cass, why don't you ever smile at Mama like you smile at me? Don't you think she's pretty, too?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Elowen felt heat flood her cheeks, but she couldn't look away from Cassian's face. For one unguarded moment, his mask slipped completely, and the raw hunger in his eyes made her forget how to breathe. "Your mama is," he started, his voice rough, then caught himself. The wall slammed back up so fast it was almost audible. "Your mama is very professional. That's what matters at work." But Noah, with the blunt honesty of childhood, wasn't satisfied. "That's not what I asked. I asked if you think she's pretty." The silence stretched between them in their makeshift fort, the outside world muffled by jacket walls and whispered secrets. Elowen could hear Cassian's breathing, shallow and controlled, could see the war playing out across his features. "Yeah, buddy," he finally whispered, his eyes locked on Elowen's. "Your mama is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." The confession hit her like a physical blow. 3 years of cold professionalism, of feeling invisible and dismissed, shattered in an instant. But before she could process what she'd heard, Noah's stomach gave another mighty growl. "Oh man, I'm really hungry now," he announced, effectively breaking the spell. Cassian cleared his throat and began backing out of the fort. "What do you like to eat, Agent Noah?" "Mac and cheese, the kind in the blue box with the cheese powder. Mama makes it when I'm sick or sad and it tastes like happiness." Elowen watched in amazement as Cassian pulled out his phone. "Jessica, I need you to send someone to get Kraft mac and cheese, the blue box kind, and have them prepare it in the executive kitchen. Yes, now, and maybe some apple juice boxes." He hung up and turned back to Noah, who was staring at him with hero worship gleaming in his green eyes. "You can make mac and cheese happen with just your phone? That's like magic." "When you're hungry, buddy, we make it happen." Cassian's smile was soft, genuine, and it transformed his entire face. "Can't have our secret agents running on empty stomachs." As they extracted themselves from the fort, Elowen caught sight of herself in the conference room's glass wall. Her honey-blonde hair was mussed, her professional composure completely undone. But for the first time in 3 years, She didn't feel like just the efficient secretary. She felt like a woman who had just discovered that the man she'd thought hated her might actually. "The food should be here in 10 minutes, Cassian said, straightening his tie with practiced efficiency. But his eyes lingered on her face, and she saw that hunger again, quickly suppressed but unmistakably real. "Thank you," she managed. "You didn't have to." "Agent Castle always takes care of his team," Noah interrupted solemnly, and both adults laughed despite themselves. As Cassian headed for the door, he paused, his hand on the handle. "Elowen?" Her name on his lips was soft, almost tender. "Take your time with lunch. The Morrison meeting can wait." After he left, Noah climbed into his mother's lap, his small arms wrapping around her neck. "Mama, I really like Mr. Cass. He makes you smile different." "Different how, baby?" Noah considered this with 4-year-old seriousness. Like when you watch those movies on Netflix after I go to bed. The ones with the kissing." Heat flooded Elowen's cheeks as she realized her son had noticed more than she'd thought. But before she could respond, the door opened again, and Jessica appeared with a tray bearing the promised mac and cheese and apple juice. As Noah dove into his lunch with typical 4-year-old enthusiasm, Elowen stared out the glass wall toward Cassian's office. He was on a call, gesturing with one hand, while the other unconsciously touched the spot over his heart. The same gesture she'd seen him make that morning when she'd left to pick up Noah. The same gesture that made her wonder if Cassian James Hale might be hiding the biggest secret of all, that maybe, just maybe, he was as affected by her as she was beginning to realize she was by him. 3 days had passed since the fort incident, and Elowen couldn't stop thinking about those 5 words. "The most beautiful woman I've ever seen." She sat at her desk Friday morning, fingers hovering over her keyboard as she tried to focus on quarterly reports. But every few minutes her gaze drifted to Cassian's office, where he sat rigid behind his mahogany desk, back to his familiar mask of cold professionalism. Had she imagined the tenderness in his voice? The way his eyes had lingered on her face? "Mrs. Blake?" Jessica's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mr. Hale's asking for the Morrison files. He wants the originals from the server, not the copies." Elowen nodded, grateful for the distraction. She made her way to the file server room, a small space tucked behind the executive suite where sensitive documents were stored. As she searched through the digital archives, her finger slipped on the mouse, accidentally clicking on a folder labeled HR Confidential EB. Her breath caught. Those were her initials. She knew she shouldn't look. Privacy policies, professional, boundaries, common sense. All of it screamed at her to close the folder and pretend she'd never seen it. But her hand moved independently, double-clicking the folder open. What she found made her legs go weak. Email after email, spanning 3 years, all from Cassian's private account to various department heads. The subject lines alone told a story. R.E. Elowen Blake, performance review, exceptional rating required. Budget approval, salary increase for E. Blake, effective immediately. R.E. Peterson's comments about Blake, unacceptable. Emergency authorization, personal time for E. Blake, family emergency. Her hands trembling, she opened the first email, dated just 2 months after she'd started working at Hale Technologies. "David, I'm reviewing the Q3 performance evaluations, and notice you've rated Elowen Blake as meets expectations. This is unacceptable. Mrs. Blake has single-handedly reorganized our entire filing system, reduced my meeting scheduling conflicts by 80%, and has never missed a deadline despite managing a personal situation that would challenge anyone. Change her rating to exceeds expectations and process a merit increase effective immediately. Her contribution to this company is invaluable. C. Hale." Elowen's vision blurred as she scrolled through email after email, each one revealing a pattern of protection and advocacy she'd never suspected. There was the time Marcus from accounting had made an inappropriate comment about her appearance. Cassian had written a scathing response that resulted in Marcus being transferred to another department. When she'd needed emergency time off for Noah's ear infection, Cassian had personally approved paid family leave before she'd even asked. But it was the most recent email, sent just last week, that made her sink into the nearby chair. All department heads. I want to make something crystal clear regarding Mrs. Elowen Blake. She is the most competent, dedicated, and professional employee this company has ever had. Anyone who questions her work ethic, her capabilities, or her commitment will answer directly to me. She manages responsibilities that would overwhelm most people, and she does it with grace and excellence. We are fortunate to have her, and I expect everyone to treat her with the respect she deserves. Furthermore, any personal comments about Mrs. Blake are strictly prohibited and will result in immediate disciplinary action. Cassian James Hale, CEO. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering her mouth with her hand. For 3 years, she'd believed Cassian barely tolerated her presence. She'd gone home countless nights feeling inadequate, wondering if she was living up to the standards of her high-powered job. Meanwhile, he'd been fighting battles she never knew existed, protecting her reputation and ensuring her success. Looking for something? Elowen spun around, heart hammering, to find Cassian standing in the doorway. His tall frame filled the space, and those blue-gray eyes were fixed on her computer screen with an expression she couldn't read. The Morrison files," she stammered, quickly moving to close the window. But it was too late. He'd seen everything. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. Cassian stepped into the small room, closing the door behind him with a soft click. In the confined space, his presence was overwhelming. The scent of his cologne, the heat radiating from his body, the intensity of his gaze. "You weren't supposed to see those," he said quietly, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Why?" The word escaped before she could stop it. "Why did you do all this?" He turned away, running a hand through his dark hair in that gesture she'd come to recognize as his tell when he was struggling with something internal. "Because you deserved better than what they were giving you." "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you." But Elowen had spent 3 years walking on eggshells around this man, and the emails had changed everything. She stood up, moving closer until she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched as he fought some internal battle. "You wrote that I was the most competent employee the company has ever had," she said softly. "You've been protecting me for 3 years. You fought for me when I didn't even know I needed fighting for." "Why, Cassian?" Her use of his first name made him flinch as if she'd touched him. When he turned to face her, the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. "Because watching you struggle while maintaining that smile, seeing you doubt yourself when you're the strongest person I know, observing you give everything to everyone else while never asking for anything in return." He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. "It was killing me." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with 3 years of suppressed truth. Elowen felt her world tilt on its axis as she realized that every cold word, every dismissive glance, every moment of professional distance had been armor. He hadn't been protecting himself from her. He'd been protecting her from him. "I don't understand," she whispered. Cassian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Of course you don't. You see everything good in everyone except yourself. You have no idea what you do to me, do you?" Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. The spell shattered as reality crashed back in. Cassian straightened, his professional mask sliding back into place so quickly it was almost violent. "The Morrison meeting is in 10 minutes, he said, his voice once again all business. "Get those files to conference room B." He moved toward the door, but Elowen's voice stopped him. "Cassian, wait." "This conversation never happened," he said without turning around. "Those emails are confidential, for your protection and mine." As the door closed behind him, Elowen stood alone in the file room, her heart pounding and her mind reeling. She'd thought she knew Cassian James Hale, cold, demanding, unreachable. But the man revealed in those emails, the man who'd just stood before her with his soul laid bare, was someone entirely different. Someone who'd been watching over her with the fierce protectiveness of a man who what? The thought she couldn't finish terrified her almost as much as the realization that her entire world had just shifted on its axis. But as she gathered the Morrison files with shaking hands, one thing was crystal clear. After today, nothing between them would ever be the same again. And she wasn't sure if that thrilled her or terrified her more. The crisis hit at 8:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, just as Elowen was tucking Noah into bed with his favorite dinosaur story. Her phone buzzed with Cassian's name on the screen, and her heart did that little skip it had been doing ever since the file room incident 3 days ago. Since discovering those emails, she'd been hypersensitive to every interaction, the way his eyes lingered on her face during meetings, how his voice softened, almost imperceptibly when he said her name, the careful distance he maintained as if afraid of what might happen if he got too close. The servers crashed. His voice was tight with controlled frustration when she answered. We lost everything on the Henderson project. If we don't recover the data and rebuild the presentation by tomorrow's 9 a.m. meeting, we lose the biggest client in company history. Elowen glanced at Noah, already half asleep with his thumb in his mouth and golden curls spread across his Superman pillowcase. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Elowen, you don't understand. This is going to take all night, maybe longer. Then it takes all night. She was already moving, grabbing her laptop bag and car keys. Noah can sleep in your office. He's done it before when I've had to work late from home. The silence on the other end of the line stretched. So long she thought the call had dropped. Cassian, you'd do that? Bring him here this late? Something in his voice, vulnerable, almost disbelieving, made her chest tighten. Of course. We're a team, remember? All three of us. Another pause, then quietly, I'll have security let you up. An hour later, Hale Technologies was a different world. The bustling corporate energy had been replaced by an intimate quietness, broken only by the hum of computers and the soft Austin rain against floor-to-ceiling windows. Emergency lighting cast everything in warm, golden shadows, making the usually intimidating space feel almost cozy. Noah had barely stirred when she'd transferred him from car seat to the small couch in Cassian's office, his little body curled under his favorite blanket with Benny the Brontosaurus clutched to his chest. Watching him sleep in the soft lamplight, Elowen felt her heart squeeze with the familiar fierce protectiveness of motherhood. He looked so peaceful, came Cassian's voice from behind her, and she turned to find him leaning against his desk, tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled up to his forearms. The sight of him, powerful and commanding even in casual disarray, sent heat spiraling through her chest. He could sleep through a tornado, she said softly. One time the smoke detector went off at 2 a.m. faulty battery and he didn't even twitch. Cassian's lips curved in that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Must get that from his dad. The casual comment hit like a physical blow. Elowen's breath caught, and she saw the moment Cassian realized his mistake. The way his face went carefully blank, how his body tensed as if preparing for her to flee. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I didn't mean to. No, it's okay. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm office. Most people don't know. About Daniel, I mean. About what happened. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Finally, Cassian spoke, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. You don't have to. He died in a car accident when I was 8 months pregnant. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. 3 years of careful privacy cracking, open like a dam. Drunk driver ran a red light. Daniel was coming home from work, probably thinking about cribs and baby names and whether we'd have enough room in our tiny apartment. She could feel Cassian's eyes on her, but she couldn't look at him. Not yet. Noah was born 6 weeks early because of the trauma. I held him for the first time at Daniel's funeral. Her voice cracked slightly. Everyone kept saying how sorry they were, how hard it must be, but all I could think was that I had to be enough. For both of them. For the husband I'd lost and the son who'd never know his father. When she finally looked up, the expression on Cassian's face nearly undid her. Raw pain, fierce protectiveness, and something deeper, something that looked almost like reverence. "You were 25, he said quietly. "A kid yourself." "I grew up fast." She managed a shaky smile. "Had to." "Is that why you work so hard? Why you never—" He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Why you keep everyone at arm's length?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with 3 years of professional distance and the growing awareness that everything had changed. "Maybe," she admitted. "It's easier. Safer." Safer for who? Before she could answer, Noah stirred on the couch, mumbling something about dinosaurs and juice boxes. Both adults froze, but he settled back into sleep without waking. "We should get to work," Cassian said, but his voice lacked conviction. For the next 4 hours, they worked side by side in companionable silence, rebuilding the Henderson presentation from backup files and scratch documents. But the real intimacy wasn't in their professional collaboration. It was in the small moments between. When Cassian quietly placed a cup of coffee beside her laptop, perfectly made with the splash of cream she preferred. When she noticed him, checking on Noah every 20 minutes, adjusting the blanket or moving closer to make sure the little boy was comfortable. Around 1 a.m., exhaustion finally caught up with her. Alawan's eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets, and she rubbed her temples trying to stave off the headache she felt building. "Hey." Cassian's voice was soft, concerned. "Take a break. We're almost done. Just need to finish the quarterly projections and—" "Alawan." The way he said her name made her look up. He was standing beside her chair, close enough that she could smell his cologne. "I don't know what you mean. When's the last time you slept 8 hours, took a day off that wasn't for Noah's school events or sick days? Did something just because it made you happy?" She stared up at him. This man who'd spent 3 years hiding behind a mask of professional indifference, and realized he saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. "I don't remember," she whispered. Something shifted in his expression. A decision being made. A wall finally crumbling. He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of honey blonde hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, warm and slightly rough from his morning workouts. "You deserve to be taken care of too," he said quietly. The moment stretched between them, loaded with possibility and 3 years of suppressed longing. Alawan could feel her heart hammering against her ribs as Cassian's thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone. His blue-gray eyes were dark with an emotion that made her breath catch. "Cassian, Mama?" Noah's sleepy voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I'm thirsty." They sprang apart as if burned, the spell shattered. Cassian stepped back, running a hand through his dark hair while Alawan hurried to Noah with a water bottle from her purse. "Hey, baby. Just water, okay? We need to let you go back to sleep." As Noah settled back down, Alawan was acutely aware of Cassian watching them, her with her son, the easy intimacy of their bedtime routine even in this strange setting. When she glanced up, the hunger in his eyes was so intense it made her pulse race. But along with the desire, she saw something else. Longing. The look of a man who wanted desperately to be part of something he believed he could never have. "The presentation's done," he said quietly, his voice carefully controlled. "You should take Noah home, get some real sleep." "Cassian, thank you," he interrupted, not looking at her. "For tonight. For everything." As she gathered Noah and their things, she could feel the weight of all the words they hadn't said, all the truths that had almost surfaced in the quiet intimacy of the night. But as the elevator doors closed behind them, one thing was crystal clear. The careful professional distance they'd maintained for 3 years was completely and irrevocably shattered, and tomorrow they'd have to figure out what came next. The Henderson presentation was a complete success, but Alawan couldn't focus on the congratulations echoing around the conference room. She sat at the mahogany table, perfectly professional, in her tailored emerald blazer and cream silk blouse, but her mind kept drifting to the night before. The way Cassian's fingers had felt against her cheek, the hunger in his blue-gray eyes, the gentle reverence in his voice when he'd said she deserved to be taken care of too. Across the table, Cassian was fielding questions from the Henderson Industries executives with his usual commanding presence. But she caught the moments when his gaze flickered to her. Quick, almost guilty glances that sent heat spiraling through her chest. "Outstanding work, both of you," declared Robert Henderson, shaking Cassian's hand enthusiastically. "This partnership is going to be very profitable for everyone involved." As the meeting disbanded and clients filed out, Elowen began gathering her notes, acutely aware that she and Cassian were alone for the first time since their almost kiss 12 hours ago. Elowen. His voice was carefully neutral, but she could hear the undercurrent of something deeper. "Could you stay for a moment?" Her heart hammered against her ribs as the conference room door closed behind the last executive. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and the memory of his touch. "About last night," he began. "Mr. Hale?" Jessica's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 11 o'clock is here early. Should I send them in?" Cassian's jaw tightened with frustration. "Give us 5 minutes." But 5 minutes wasn't enough to navigate the minefield their relationship had become. Elowen stood, smoothing her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "We should talk," she said quietly, "but not here. Not like this." Something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or anticipation. "Tonight, after work, there's a coffee shop. On 5th Street, quiet, neutral territory. I'll have to arrange childcare. Bring Noah." The words came out rough, almost desperate. "Please, I need him there too." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest tighten. This wasn't just about them anymore. Somehow, without either of them planning it, Noah had become part of whatever was happening between them. "Okay," she whispered. 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock. But 6 o'clock never came. At 4:30, Elowen's phone rang with a call that changed everything. Little Sprouts Daycare, their voices tight with concern. "Mrs. Blake, Noah's running a fever. It came on suddenly. He was fine at lunch, but now he's at 102 and asking for you." The world tilted. Elowen was already reaching for her purse, her mind racing through the familiar checklist of single motherhood crisis management, pediatrician's office, children's Tylenol, urgent care if the fever climbed higher. "I'm on my way," she said, but as she headed for the elevator, Cassian appeared, beside her. "What's wrong?" His voice was sharp with concern. "Noah's sick. High fever. I'm coming with you." The words stopped her cold. "Cassian, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His tone brooked no argument. "Jessica, cancel my afternoon meetings. Emergency family situation." Family situation. The words hit her, like a physical blow, because that's exactly what this felt like. Two parents responding to their child's crisis together. 20 minutes later, they were at Little Sprouts, where Noah lay listless on a small cot in the nurse's office. His golden curls were damp with sweat, his usually bright green eyes glassy with fever. But when he saw them walk in together, his face lit up with a smile that broke Elowen's heart. "Mama, Mr. Cass." His voice was hoarse but excited. "You came together." "Of course we did, buddy." Cassian was already kneeling beside the cot, his large hand gentle on Noah's forehead. "How are you feeling?" "My tummy hurts, and I'm really hot, but I'm happy you're both here." Noah's innocent words hung in the air, and Elowen saw something shift in Cassian's expression, a recognition maybe of what this moment meant. The pediatrician confirmed it was just a virus, but Noah's fever spiked to 103.5 on the drive home. Elowen's hands shook as she buckled him into his car seat. 3 years, the words hung between them, raw and honest and terrifying in their intensity. Elowen stared into his eyes, seeing not the cold CEO she'd worked for, but the man who'd spent the evening singing Disney songs to her fevered son and holding her together when she wanted to fall apart. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. His smile was soft, vulnerable. But I'm more scared of losing this chance, of losing you and Noah. As if summoned by their conversation, Noah's sleepy voice drifted from his bedroom. Mama? Mr. Cass? Are you still here? They looked at each other, and Elowen saw her own realization reflected in Cassian's eyes. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about becoming a family. And for the first time in 4 years, that didn't terrify her. It felt like coming home. Saturday morning sunlight streamed through Elowen's kitchen windows as she watched. The most powerful man in Austin flipped pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. The T-Rex needs more tail, Noah announced from his perch on the kitchen counter, still in his superhero pajamas but looking infinitely better than he had 2 days ago. His fever had broken completely, leaving behind only a slightly stuffy nose and boundless energy. More tail coming right up, Chef Noah, Cassian replied with mock seriousness, adjusting the pancake batter with a concentration usually reserved for multi-million-dollar deals. He'd arrived at 8 a.m. with groceries, claiming Noah needed proper recovery food. But Elowen suspected he simply wanted an excuse to stay. He looked different here in her small kitchen, younger somehow, more relaxed. His dark hair was slightly mussed. He wore faded jeans that hugged his athletic frame, and a simple gray Henley that stretched across his broad shoulders. The corporate armor was completely gone, replaced by something infinitely more dangerous, to her peace of mind. Mama, look. Mr. Cass made the brontosaurus have a really long neck. Noah clapped his hands in delight, and both adults smiled at his enthusiasm. I see that, baby. Very impressive. She caught Cassian's eye over Noah's head, and the warmth she found there made her pulse quicken. 2 days ago, they'd crossed every professional line that existed. Now, watching him in her domestic space, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Can Mr. Cass stay for cartoons? Noah asked, already reaching for the syrup bottle, with sticky fingers. That's up to Mr. Cass, Elowen said, though her heart hammered with the hope that he'd say yes. I'd love to stay for cartoons, Cassian replied, then added quietly, if your mama doesn't mind. The way he said it, deferential, hopeful, like her opinion was the only one that mattered, made something flutter in her chest. I don't mind at all. 3 hours later, her small living room had been transformed into what Noah called the ultimate Fort Kingdom. Couch cushions formed walls, blankets created a ceiling, and every pillow in the apartment had been recruited for maximum comfort. The three of them were squeezed together in the cramped space, Noah curled between them as they watched Paw Patrol. For the 3rd consecutive episode. This is way better than my apartment, Cassian murmured, his voice warm with contentment. Really? Elowen glanced around at her modest home. The second-hand furniture, the crayon marks on the coffee table, the general chaos of life with a 4-year-old. It's not exactly executive level. That's exactly why it's better. His blue-gray eyes were serious as they met hers. It feels like a home. Noah, oblivious to the adult conversation happening over his head, suddenly sat up with the urgency only children could muster. I have the best idea ever. Mr. Cass, you should come to the park with us. You can push me on the swings and Mama can take pictures and we can feed the ducks. Noah, Mr. Cass might have other plans. Actually, Cassian interrupted, that sounds perfect if you're sure you don't mind me tagging along. An hour later, they were at Zilker Park, Austin's crown jewel, where families gathered every weekend for picnics and playground adventures. Elowen sat on a bench, phone in hand, watching Cassian push Noah on the swings with the focused attention he usually reserved for board meetings. Higher, Mr. Cass, I want to touch the clouds. Hold on tight, buddy, Cassian called back, his deep laughter carrying on the warm Texas breeze. Elowen captured the moment, Noah's face bright with joy, Cassian's genuine smile, the easy intimacy between them that spoke of something deeper than friendship. Through her camera lens, they looked like what she'd never dared to dream they could be. A family. Excuse me, came a gentle voice beside her. An elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes had approached the bench. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but your husband is wonderful with your son." Heat flooded Elowen's cheeks. "Oh, he's not my mistake, dear," the woman said with a knowing smile. "But the way he looks at you both, well, let's just say I've been married 53 years and I know that look." Before Elowen could respond, the woman had wandered away, leaving her staring at Cassian with new eyes. As if sensing her gaze, he looked over, and the expression on his face when their eyes met made her breath catch. Soft, protective, and unmistakably loving. "Mama, come see what Mr. Cass taught me." Noah's voice broke the spell, and she hurried over to where they stood, by the jungle gym. "Watch this," Noah announced, then proceeded to cross the monkey bars with Cassian spotting him carefully below. "Mr. Cass said if I practice every day, I'll be strong enough to climb mountains." "Mountains, huh?" Elowen laughed, but her voice caught slightly. As she watched Cassian's patient encouragement, the way he celebrated Noah's small victories as if they were major achievements. "The biggest mountains," Cassian confirmed solemnly. "Right, buddy?" As the afternoon wore on, they found themselves at the duck pond, sharing a bag of breadcrumbs, while Noah chattered excitedly about the different waterfowl. Cassian listened, with the same intense focus he brought to corporate negotiations, asking questions and offering observations that made Noah beam with pride. "Mr. Cass, do you have a little boy?" Noah asked suddenly, his 4-year-old directness cutting straight to the heart of things. Cassian's hand stilled on the bread bag. "No, I don't." "Do you want one?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that made Elowen's heart race. Cassian glanced at her, then back at Noah, and when he spoke, his voice was thick, with emotion. "Yeah, buddy. I think I do." Noah considered this with the seriousness of a judge. "Well, you can share me if you want. I have lots of love, and Mama says love gets bigger when you share it, not smaller." Elowen felt tears prick at her eyes. Her son, with his innocent wisdom, had just offered the most precious gift he possessed, his heart. "I'd be honored to share you," Cassian said quietly, and when he looked at Elowen, she saw her own overwhelming emotion reflected in his eyes. The drive home was peaceful, Noah chattering sleepily in his car seat about their perfect day, while Cassian navigated Austin traffic with one hand on the wheel and the other reaching across to hold Elowen's fingers. The simple gesture, intimate, protective claiming, sent warmth spiraling through her entire body. "Thank you," she said quietly as they pulled into her apartment complex. "For what?" "For today, for making him so happy, for—" She struggled to find words for the magnitude of what she felt. "For being exactly what we needed." Cassian parked and turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Elowen, I need you to know this isn't some weekend experiment for me. What I feel for you, for Noah, it's not going away." "I know," she whispered. "I feel it too." "Then where do we go from here?" The question she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. They couldn't go back to boss and secretary, not after today, not after watching him love her son with the fierce devotion of a father, not after feeling her own walls crumble completely. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I know I don't want this to end." Cassian's smile was soft, relieved. "Good, because I have some ideas about our future, if you're willing to listen." As they walked toward her apartment, Noah drowsy in Cassian's arms, Elowen realized that somewhere between pancakes and playground swings, her carefully controlled life had shifted irrevocably. And for the first time since Daniel's death, that didn't terrify her. It felt like the beginning of something beautiful. Monday morning brought a crisis that would test everything they'd built over the weekend. Elowen arrived at Hale Technologies to find the executive floor buzzing with unusual tension. Employees clustered in small groups, their conversations stopping abruptly when she passed. Jessica looked up from her desk with wide, worried eyes. "Mrs. Blake, thank goodness you're here. Mr. Hale needs to see you immediately. Conference room. A." Elowen's stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Had someone seen them at the park? Were there pictures? In the corporate world, relationships between executives and their assistants were career-ending scandals, especially when children were involved. She found Cassian standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his broad shoulders rigid with tension beneath his charcoal suit. The morning sunlight caught the sharp angles of his profile, highlighting the stress lines around his eyes. "Close the door," he said without turning around. The click of the latch seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. "Cassian, what's wrong?" He turned then, and the expression on his face made her blood run cold. Not anger. She could have handled anger. This was resignation, defeat, the look of a man who'd been backed into an impossible corner. "The board met in emergency session this morning," he said quietly. "Someone took photos of us at the park. Us with Noah." Elowen's knees went weak. She sank into the nearest chair, her mind racing through the implications. Who? Does it matter? They're everywhere now. Social media, local business blogs. The Austin American-Statesman picked it up an hour ago. He moved to his laptop, clicking through screens with mechanical precision. Look, the photos were innocent enough. Cassian pushing Noah on the swings, the three of them feeding ducks, his hand holding hers during the walk back to the car. But the headlines were brutal. Tech CEO's secret family. Is Cassian Hale dating his secretary? Hale Technologies boss spotted with employee and child at local park. Corporate romance scandal rocks Austin business community. "Oh God," Elowen whispered, covering her face with her hands. "Noah, if this gets back to his school, if the other parents—" "Hey!" Cassian was suddenly kneeling beside her chair, his large hands gently pulling hers away from her face. "Look at me. Noah is going to be fine. We'll protect him from this." "How? How do we protect him when his mother is splashed across the internet as some kind of—" She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the ugly implications. "You are not some kind of anything," Cassian said fiercely. "You're the woman I love. You're Noah's mother. You're the strongest, most incredible person I know, and I will not let anyone suggest otherwise." The declaration hung between them, raw and powerful. Even in the midst of crisis, those three words, "the woman I love," sent her heart racing. "The board wants to see you," he continued, his voice gentling. "They're demanding an explanation, and frankly, I think they have the right to one. What are you going to tell them?" Cassian stood, straightening his tie with the mechanical precision she recognized as his armor-building routine. "The truth." An hour later, Elowen sat in the executive boardroom surrounded by 12 of Austin's most powerful business leaders. At the head of the table, board chairman William Morrison, yes, the same Morrison whose account they'd saved just days ago, studied her with calculating eyes. "Mrs. Blake," he began, his voice deceptively gentle, "you understand our concern. Relationships between executives and their direct reports create complications, liability issues, questions about favoritism, inappropriate conduct, potential harassment claims." "I understand," Elowen replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "How long has this relationship been going on?" Before she could answer, the boardroom door opened and Cassian strode in, commanding attention without saying a word. His presence filled the room, radiating the confidence and authority that had built an empire. "Gentlemen," he said, taking his seat at the head of the table, "I understand you have questions about my personal life." "Cassian, we're simply trying to understand," Morrison began. "No." Cassian's voice cut through the room like steel. "You're trying to decide if my relationship with Elowen Blake represents a liability to this company. So let me make this simple for everyone." He stood, his 6'3" frame commanding absolute attention. "For 3 years, I have been completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with Elowen Blake. For 3 years, I have maintained absolute professionalism, because I believed my feelings were one-sided and inappropriate. For 3 years, I have done everything in my power to advance her career and protect her reputation while keeping my personal feelings completely separate from business decisions. Alawan stared at him, her heart hammering as he laid his soul bare in front of the most powerful men in Austin. Last week, circumstances changed. We discovered that our feelings were mutual and that her 4-year-old son had become important to me. Very important. His voice softened slightly. This weekend we spent time together as a family, and yes, we were photographed. I regret the invasion of their privacy, but I do not regret the relationship. Cassian, Morrison said carefully, surely you understand the position this puts the company in? I understand perfectly. Cassian's smile was sharp, dangerous. Which is why I'm offering my resignation, effective immediately. The words hit the room like a bomb. Several board members spoke at once, their voices overlapping in shocked protest. But Alawan heard none of it over the roaring in her ears. You can't, she whispered, standing on unsteady legs. Cassian, this company is your life. You built this from nothing. No, he said quietly. His eyes locked on hers. You and Noah, you're my life. This company is just what I do. Board Chairman Morrison cleared his throat, calling for order. Mr. Hale, let's not be hasty. Perhaps there's a compromise. There is, Cassian replied. Mrs. Blake will tender her resignation this afternoon and accept a position with a competing firm, at a significant salary increase, which I will personally guarantee. We will maintain complete professional separation while pursuing our personal relationship. Absolutely not, Alawan said, her voice stronger now. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. And I won't be the reason you're treated like some kind of corporate scandal. Cassian moved around the table until he stood beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the heat radiating from his body. Alawan, for 3 years I've made decisions about your career without consulting you. I'm not doing that anymore. This is your choice. The room fell silent as 12 powerful men waited for her decision, but Alawan only had eyes for Cassian, this man who just offered to sacrifice his empire for her happiness. I need to think, she said finally. I need to consider what's best for Noah. Of course. Cassian's hand brushed hers, the brief contact sending electricity up her arm. Take all the time you need. As the board meeting dispersed, Morrison lingered, studying both of them with shrewd eyes. You know, he said thoughtfully, in all my years in business, I've seen a lot of relationships come and go, but I've never seen a man willing to give up everything for love. He paused, his expression softening slightly. Maybe that's exactly the kind of man we want leading this company. After he left, Cassian and Alawan stood alone in the empty boardroom, the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on them. I can't let you do this, she said quietly, and I can't let you be destroyed by gossip and speculation. He reached for her hands, his fingers warm and strong. We'll figure this out. Ellie, together. Promise me something, she whispered. Anything. Promise me that no matter what happens, we don't let them take away what we found this weekend. Promise me that Noah doesn't lose the man who taught him to cross the monkey bars. Cassian's smile was soft, devastating. I promise. No matter what happens next, I'm not going anywhere. But as they left the boardroom hand in hand, both of them knew that some promises were easier to make than to keep, and the hardest test of their love was still to come. The call came at 3:47 a.m. on Wednesday, shattering the fragile peace Alawan had managed to find after 2 days of media chaos. Mrs. Blake? The voice was professional, apologetic, but carried news that made her blood run cold. This is Sandra from Little Sprouts Daycare. I'm so sorry to call this early, but we need to discuss Noah's enrollment. Alawan sat up in bed, her heart hammering. What's wrong? Is Noah okay? Noah is fine, but we've received several calls from other parents expressing concerns about the recent media attention. The board feels it would be best if we suspended Noah's enrollment temporarily until things settle down. The words hit like a physical blow. You're kicking out my 4-year-old son because of gossip? I'm truly sorry, Mrs. Blake. This isn't personal, but we have to consider all our families. Elowen hung up without another word, her hands shaking with rage and helplessness. They were coming for Noah now. Her innocent little boy who just wanted to play with dinosaurs and learn his ABCs was being punished for his mother's choices. By 6 a.m., she was at Hale Technologies, her professional armor firmly in place despite the sleepless night. She found Cassian already at his desk, looking as haggard as she felt. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his tie askew, and there were dark circles under his blue-gray eyes. They kicked Noah out of daycare, she said without preamble. Cassian's head snapped up, his expression going from tired to furious in an instant. What? Other parents complained. Bad publicity. They suspended his enrollment, temporarily. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she saw something dangerous flash in Cassian's eyes. Give me the name of the daycare director. Cassian, no, you'll only make it worse. I'll make it better. He was already reaching for his phone. No one punishes a 4-year-old for falling in love with his mother. Stop. The word came out sharper than she'd intended, but it worked. Cassian froze, his finger hovering over his contacts. This is exactly the problem. You keep trying to fix everything with money and power, but some things can't be fixed that way. The silence stretched between them, heavy with frustration and fear. Then what do you want me to do? His voice was rough with helpless anger. Watch them destroy you? Watch them hurt Noah? I can't. He stopped, running both hands through his dark hair. I can't stand seeing you in pain and not being able to help. Maybe you can't help, she whispered. Maybe this was a mistake. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Cassian went completely still, his face draining of color. You don't mean that, don't I? The exhaustion of 2 sleepless nights, the stress of watching her life implode, the fear for Noah's future. It all came pouring out. Look what's happened, Cassian. In 1 week I've become a public scandal, lost my son's daycare, and destroyed your relationship with your board. Maybe everyone is right. Maybe this is exactly what happens when people like us try to cross lines we shouldn't cross. People like us? His voice was dangerously quiet. You know what I mean. No, I don't. Explain it to me. Elowen wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm Austin morning. You're a CEO worth millions. I'm a single mother who shops at Target and drives a 5-year-old Honda. You live in a penthouse. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with crayon marks on the walls. This was always going to end badly. Cassian stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made her flinch. You think this is about money? About social status? He stood, his tall frame, radiating hurt and anger. After everything we've shared, after watching me love your son like he was my own, you think I care about any of that? I think you care about your company, your reputation, your future. Her voice broke slightly. And I think eventually you'll realize that we're not worth losing everything for. The words hit him like a slap. For a moment, his mask slipped completely, and she saw the raw pain in his eyes, the fear of abandonment that went back to a 5-year-old boy watching his father walk away. So that's it? He said quietly. The first time things get difficult, you run? I'm not running. I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. The accusation hung between them, brutal in its honesty. Elowen felt tears prick at her eyes, but she forced them back. She couldn't afford to break down now. Maybe I am, she whispered, but I'm also being a mother, and a mother protects her child, even if it means sacrificing her own happiness. What about what Noah wants? Have you asked him? He's 4 years old, Cassian. He doesn't understand. He understands love. He understands family. He understands that for the first time in his life, he has a father figure who adores him. Cassian's voice was thick with emotion. You're so busy protecting him from potential hurt that you're guaranteeing he'll lose the one thing he wants most. Before she could respond, The office door burst open and Noah himself appeared, having escaped from the reception area where Elowen had left him with Jessica during this conversation. "Mr. Cass?" he called out, running straight to Cassian with the fearless joy only children possessed. "Are you and Mama fighting? Your voices sound angry." Cassian immediately knelt to Noah's level, his expression softening completely. "Hey, buddy. We're just talking about grown-up stuff. Are you going away?" Noah asked with the directness that always caught adults off guard. "The kids at school said their parents saw pictures of us, and now everyone's talking about it. Tommy said his mom thinks you're gonna leave us like my daddy did." The innocent words hit both adults like a physical blow. Elowen saw Cassian's face go white, watched him struggle with how to answer a question that went to the heart of everything. "Noah," Elowen started, but her son wasn't finished. "I told Tommy he was wrong," Noah continued, his small hand reaching up to touch Cassian's cheek. "'Cause you promised you weren't going anywhere, remember? You promised." Cassian's eyes filled with tears he couldn't hide. "I remember, buddy." "Good. 'Cause I love you, Mr. Cass. Like really, really love you. And I don't want you to go away, just 'cause people are being mean." The simple, pure declaration broke something inside both adults. Cassian pulled Noah into a fierce hug, and over the little boy's head, his eyes met Elowen's. "I love you too, Noah," he whispered, "more than you'll ever know." "Then why does Mama look so sad?" The question forced Elowen to confront the truth she'd been avoiding. Looking at them, her son in the arms of the man who'd become his hero, both of them looking at her with identical expressions of hope and love, she realized that her fear wasn't protecting anyone. It was destroying everything beautiful they'd built. "Sometimes grown-ups get scared," she said softly, kneeling beside them. "And when we're scared, we make bad decisions." "Are you gonna make a bad decision, Mama?" Out of the mouths of babes, Elowen looked into her son's green eyes, so like her own, but filled with a trust and optimism she'd forgotten how to feel. "I don't know, baby. I honestly don't know." But as Cassian reached out to take her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers while Noah beamed at their connection, she realized that maybe the biggest risk wasn't in loving him. Maybe the biggest risk was in letting fear win again. The question was, did she have the courage to fight for the family they'd all started to believe in? The emergency board meeting was called for Friday at 4 p.m., and everyone knew it would determine the fate of Hale Technologies' leadership. Elowen sat in her car outside the building, watching employees stream out for the weekend while she wrestled with the decision that would change everything. In the back seat, Noah colored quietly in his dinosaur coloring book, humming a song Cassian had taught him about brave knights and dragons. 3 days had passed since their confrontation in his office. 3 days of careful professionalism, polite distance, and the growing certainty that she was about to lose the best thing that had ever happened to her family. "Mama," Noah said suddenly, "why aren't we going upstairs to see Mr. Cass?" Her heart clenched. "Mr. Cass is in an important meeting, baby." "Is he in trouble?" The innocent question cut straight to the truth. Yes, Cassian was in trouble. Because of her. Because he'd been brave enough to love them both, and she'd been too scared to fight for that love. "Maybe," she admitted quietly. Noah set down his crayon and looked at her with those wise green eyes that saw far too much. "Are you going to help him?" "I don't know how." "By telling the truth," he said simply. "You always tell me that truth is better than being scared." Out of the mouths of babes. Again. Elowen closed her eyes, thinking about the man 36 floors above them who'd risked everything for their happiness. The man who'd learned Noah's favorite bedtime stories, who'd held her through her fears about the past, who'd looked at her broken family and seen something worth fighting for. She thought about the emails spanning 3 years, evidence of protection and advocacy she'd never suspected. She thought about dinosaur pancakes and playground swings and the way Cassian's face lit up every time Noah called him Mr. Cass. She thought about love. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful love. And she made her choice. "Come on, baby," she said, getting out of the car. "Let's go tell the truth." The 36th floor was eerily quiet when they arrived. Jessica's desk was empty, and through the glass walls of conference room A, Elowen could see the board meeting in full swing. 12 powerful men in expensive suits, and at the head of the table, Cassian, looking every inch the commanding CEO even as they debated his future. "Stay right here with Jessica when she comes back," Elowen told Noah, settling him in the reception area with his coloring book. "Mama has something important to do." "Are you going to save Mr. Cass like the princess saves the prince in the stories?" Her heart squeezed. "Something like that." She straightened her blazer, lifted her chin, and walked into the conference room, without knocking. 12 pairs of eyes turned to her in surprise. At the head of the table, Cassian's expression shifted from shock to concern to something that looked dangerously like hope. "Mrs. Blake," Board Chairman Morrison said carefully, "this is a closed meeting." "I know exactly what this meeting is," Elowen replied, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. "You're deciding whether to remove Cassian from his position because he fell in love with me. Well, I have something to say about that." "Elowen," Cassian started, half rising from his chair, but she held up a hand to stop him. "For 3 years," she continued, looking around the table at these men who held their future in their hands, "I have worked for the most honorable, ethical, and brilliant CEO in Austin. For 3 years, Cassian Hale has maintained absolute professionalism while privately ensuring I was treated with respect, compensated fairly, and protected from workplace harassment I didn't even know was happening." She moved closer to the table, her voice gaining strength. "You want to know about our relationship? Here's the truth. Yes, Mr. Hale fell in love with me. And yes, I fell in love with him. But more importantly, he fell in love with my 4-year-old son. A little boy who lost his father before he was born and has spent his entire life without a male role model until now." Murmurs rippled around the table, but Morrison held up a hand for silence. "The man you're considering removing from leadership," Elowen continued, "is the same man who spent an entire night in a hospital waiting room when Noah had a fever, holding my hand and singing Disney songs to distract a scared little boy. He's the man who learned to make dinosaur-shaped pancakes and built blanket forts and taught a fatherless child that he was worthy of love and protection." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. "You're worried about company liability? About inappropriate conduct? Let me tell you about inappropriate conduct. Inappropriate is the way Marcus Thompson commented on my appearance until Mr. Hale had him transferred. Inappropriate is the way David Chen tried to undermine my performance reviews until Mr. Hale intervened. Inappropriate is the assumption that a powerful man can't genuinely love a single mother without it being some kind of scandal." She turned to look directly at Cassian, whose blue-gray eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This man has never, not once, used his position inappropriately with me. If anything, he bent over backward to ensure I was treated better than any employee in this company's history. And when circumstances finally allowed us to explore our feelings, he was prepared to sacrifice everything, his position, his company, his life's work, to protect my reputation and my son's future." The room was completely silent now. "So here's what I'm proposing," Elowen said, turning back to the board. "I'll resign my position effective immediately and take a comparable role elsewhere. Mr. Hale and I will maintain complete professional separation while pursuing our personal relationship. But if you remove him from leadership because he had the courage to love openly and honorably, you'll be making the biggest mistake in this company's history." She paused, looking around the table one final time. "Because love, real, honest, courageous love, doesn't make someone weaker. It makes them stronger. It makes them fight harder, work smarter, and care more deeply about the people they're responsible for. And if you can't see that Cassian Hale is a better leader because he loves my son and me, then maybe you don't deserve to have him leading this company at all." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then Morrison cleared his throat. "Mrs. Blake, that was quite a speech. It was the truth." "Yes," he said quietly. "I believe it was." He looked around the table at his fellow board members, some kind of silent communication passing between them. "Would you mind stepping outside while we deliberate?" Elowen nodded, but as she turned to go, Cassian's voice stopped her. "Ellie." Her name on his lips was soft, reverent. "Thank you." She met his eyes across the conference table, seeing all, the love and gratitude and hope reflected there. "Thank you for being worth fighting for," she replied. Outside in the reception area, Noah looked up from his coloring book as she approached. "Did you save the prince, Mama?" Elowen knelt beside his chair, pulling him into a fierce hug. "I tried, baby. I tried." Through the glass walls, she could see the board members in heated discussion while Cassian sat quietly, his eyes never leaving the conference room door. Whatever happened next, she'd finally done what she should have done from the beginning. She'd chosen love over fear, and somehow, that felt like victory enough. The boardroom door opened after what felt like an eternity, and Cassian emerged with an expression Elowen couldn't read. Her heart hammered against her ribs as he walked toward where she and Noah waited in the reception area. Behind him, the board members filed out in small groups, their faces carefully neutral. Morrison lingered in the doorway watching the scene with interest. "Mama," Noah whispered, tugging on her blazer. "Mr. Cass looks different." He was right. Something had changed in Cassian's demeanor. The rigid tension he'd carried for days was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "Elowen," he said quietly, stopping a few feet away. "We need to talk." Her stomach dropped. This was it. The end. Her speech hadn't been enough. They were losing everything. "Okay," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. But instead of the rejection she expected, Cassian's next words shattered her completely. "The board voted unanimously to retain me as CEO." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "Morrison said your speech reminded them why they hired me in the first place. Not just for my business acumen, but for my character." Cassian's voice was thick with emotion. Apparently watching someone fight that hard for love convinced them I'm exactly the kind of leader they want representing their company. Elowen stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "You're staying?" "I'm staying. On one condition." Her heart stopped. "What condition?" Cassian glanced at Noah, who was watching their conversation with rapt attention, then back at her. "That you don't resign. That you stay and help me run this company the way it should be run, as partners in every sense of the word. But the conflict of interest has been resolved." Morrison's voice interrupted from behind Cassian. "The board has approved a restructuring that will make Mrs. Blake our new director of operations, reporting directly to the board rather than to Mr. Hale. Same building, same team, but no direct employment relationship." Elowen's mind raced. "Director of operations? But I'm just a secretary." "You're the woman who's been running half this company behind the scenes for 3 years, Cassian said gently. "You're the person who knows every employee's birthday, every client's preferences, every detail that makes this place work. You're not just a secretary, Ellie. You never were. Plus," Morrison added with a slight smile, "it comes with a salary commensurate with your actual responsibilities. Should be quite an increase." Before Elowen could process what was happening, Noah jumped up from his chair with a whoop of joy. "Does this mean Mr. Cass gets to stay and Mama gets a new job and we're all going to be together?" "Yes, buddy," Cassian said, his voice breaking slightly as he knelt to Noah's level. "If your mama says yes, we're all going to be together." Noah threw his arms around Cassian's neck with the fierce affection only children possessed. "I knew you wouldn't leave us. I told Tommy you were different from my other daddy. I told him you keep your promises." Over Noah's head, Cassian's eyes met Elowen's, and the raw emotion she saw there took her breath away. "I do keep my promises," he said quietly. "Always." "Mama." Noah extracted himself from Cassian's arms and ran to her. "Say yes. Please, say yes. Mr. Cass can be my daddy. And you can be happy like in the movies and we can all live together and be a real family." The innocent hope in her son's voice broke the last of her resistance. Looking at these two males who'd somehow become her entire world, one small and golden and full of joy, the other tall and dark and looking at her like she held his heart in her hands, Elowen finally understood what courage really meant. It wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing love despite the fear. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, to all of it." Cassian's smile was blinding. He stood and crossed to her in two long strides, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because once I kiss you, Ellie, there's no going back. You're mine, and I'm yours, and Noah's ours, and the whole world can know it. I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she breathed. The kiss was everything she'd dreamed it would be. Gentle and fierce, tender and desperate, full of 3 years of suppressed longing and the promise of a lifetime of love. When they finally broke apart, Noah was jumping up and down with excitement. "Yay, now we're a real family. Can we go home and make pancakes? Can Mr. Cass read me stories? Can we build the biggest fort ever?" "Yes," Cassian laughed, sweeping Noah up in his arms while keeping one arm around Elowen. "Yes to everything." As they made their way toward the elevator, Morrison called out one final time. "Oh, and Mrs. Blake, your son is welcome back at Little Sprouts anytime. Seems some of the complaining parents had a change of heart after reading about your family in this morning's Austin Chronicle." "The Chronicle?" Elowen looked confused. Morrison's smile was knowing. "Lovely article about the power of authentic love in the business world. Someone may have shared the security footage of yesterday's board meeting with a friendly journalist. Funny how public opinion can shift when people see the real story." On the drive to Elowen's apartment, soon to be their apartment if Cassian had his way, Noah chattered excitedly from his car seat about all the adventures they'd have as a family. But in the front seat, Cassian and Elowen drove in comfortable silence, their hands intertwined on the center console. "I have something to tell you," Cassian said as they pulled into her complex. "What?" "I love you, Elowen Grace Blake. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you fight for the people you care about. I love your son like he was my own flesh and blood. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to both of you that some promises are meant to be kept forever." Tears spilled down her cheeks as she looked at this man who'd risked everything for their happiness. "I love you too," she whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." "Mama, Mr. Cass," Noah called from the back seat. "Are we gonna go make those pancakes now? I'm getting really hungry, and my tummy is making monster sounds." They laughed, the sound bright and joyous in the evening air. As they walked toward the apartment building, Noah between them holding both their hands, Elowen realized that sometimes the most beautiful love stories weren't about finding your other half. Sometimes they were about two broken people and one perfect little boy finding their way to wholeness together. And for the first time since Daniel's death, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was excited to live it. The autumn sun painted Zilker Park in shades of gold and amber, as Elowen adjusted the picnic blanket one more time, her hand unconsciously resting on the gentle curve of her 6-month belly. "Careful, love," came Cassian's warm voice as he approached with Noah perched on his shoulders, both of them laughing at some shared joke. At 6.5, Noah had grown taller and more confident, but his joy at having Cassian, now officially Dad since the adoption was finalized, remained as bright as ever. "Dad, look, I can see everything from up here," Noah announced, his golden curls catching the sunlight. "I can see the ducks and the playground and that dog that looks like a mop." "That's quite a view, buddy," Cassian chuckled, carefully lifting Noah down from his shoulders. The little boy immediately ran to Elowen, his small hands gently patting her rounded belly. "Hi, baby sister," he whispered seriously. "It's me, your big brother Noah. Dad says you can hear me in there." "She can definitely hear you," Elowen smiled, running her fingers through his hair. "She kicks every time you sing to her." 2 years had transformed all their lives in ways she'd never dared to dream. Hale Technologies had become the most employee-friendly company in Austin under their joint leadership, and Elowen's role as director of operations had earned her recognition as one of the city's top business leaders. But none of that mattered, as much as the family they'd built together. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hale?" Cassian asked, settling beside her on the blanket with the easy grace that still made her heart flutter. The wedding ring on his finger caught the light, a simple platinum band that matched hers, chosen together on a quiet Saturday morning 6 months after that life-changing board meeting. "Perfect," she replied, and meant it. The morning sickness had passed, leaving behind the glowing contentment of a woman who'd found her place in the world. "Though your daughter seems to have inherited your restless energy, she's been doing gymnastics all morning. She's excited about the picnic," Noah announced with the authority of someone who'd appointed himself the baby's official interpreter. "I told her about the ducks and the swings and how Dad makes the best peanut butter sandwiches in the whole world." "Is that so?" Cassian's eyes twinkled as he unpacked their lunch. "Well, we can't disappoint your sister, can we?" As they ate, Noah chattering about his first-grade class and his plans to teach the baby everything important, which apparently included dinosaur facts, superhero origin stories, and the proper way to build a blanket fort, Elowen found herself watching Cassian with the same wonder she'd felt 2 years ago. He'd kept every promise he'd made to them. Not just the big ones, to love them, to stay, to be the father Noah deserved, but the small ones too. He still made dinosaur pancakes on Sunday mornings. He still built elaborate forts in their living room. He still listened to Noah's bedtime, stories with the focused attention of a man who understood that these moments were precious and fleeting. "Remember when we first came here?" she asked quietly as Noah ran off to chase a butterfly. "How could I forget?" Cassian's voice was soft with memory. "You were so beautiful that day, watching me with Noah, and I was terrified you'd see how much I wanted to be part of your lives." "I was terrified too," she admitted, "of letting someone in, of risking Noah's heart along with mine. And look at us now." His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the practiced ease of 2 years together. 2 kids, a company to run in the most beautiful chaos I've ever been part of. A sudden commotion near the duck pond caught their attention. Noah was surrounded by a small group of children, animatedly explaining something about the different types of waterfowl while the other kids listened with rapt attention. "He's going to be an amazing big brother," Cassian observed, pride evident in his voice. "He already is. He talks to her every night before bed, tells her about his day, and promises to teach her all his favorite games." Elowen's eyes filled with happy tears, a common occurrence these days. "Sometimes I can't believe this is our life." "Believe it," Cassian said, bringing her hand to his lips for a gentle kiss. "This is just the beginning, love. We have so many adventures ahead of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Noah came running back, his cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom! Dad! I just had the best idea ever!" He flopped down on the blanket between them, his green eyes sparkling. "When the baby is big enough, we should bring her here for her very first picnic, and I'll show her the swings where Dad used to push me, and the fort spot where we built our first blanket castle, and the duck pond where we fed them breadcrumbs." "That sounds perfect, buddy," Elowen said, her heart full to overflowing. "And then," Noah continued, warming to his theme, "when she's old enough, I'll teach her to ride a bike, and Dad can teach her about business stuff, and you can teach her how to be brave like you were when you fought for our family." The innocent words hit both adults with their simple truth. This little boy who'd spent the first 4 years of his life without a father now spoke of family and future with the confidence of a child who knew he was completely loved and safe. "You know what, Noah?" Cassian said, pulling both his wife and son closer. "I think you've got the perfect plan." As the afternoon sun began to set, painting the park in shades of rose and gold, the Hale family packed up their picnic and walked hand in hand toward their car. Noah chattered between them about school and friends and all the things he wanted to show his baby sister, while Elowen and Cassian exchanged glances over his head, the kind of looks that spoke of shared joy, deep contentment, and endless gratitude. 2 years ago, Elowen had been a woman afraid to hope, convinced that she'd already had her chance at happiness. Now, feeling their daughter move beneath her heart, while their son planned adventures and their husband hummed contentedly beside her. She understood something profound. Love didn't diminish when you shared it. It multiplied. It grew. It created space for more joy than you ever thought possible. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, it gave you not just a second chance at happiness, but a whole new way of understanding what happiness could be. As they drove home through the Austin streets they'd come to love, toward the house where dinosaur pancakes and bedtime stories and morning hugs waited, Elowen smiled and whispered a quiet thank you to the universe for the gift of this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. Some love stories were about finding your other half, but the very best ones, the ones that lasted, were about broken people finding their way to wholeness together, one dinosaur pancake at a time. What did you learn from Elowen and Cassian's story? Have you ever had the courage to fight for love when everything seemed impossible? Your participation on our channel means so much to us. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.